For decades, America believed that its agricultural products were the default choice of the world. There was a time when the US dominated the wheat market with conditions so favorable that America's desires became the rules. But in 2025, everything collapsed in less than 2 months. 6 countries that had once been close partners with the US simultaneously withdrew and turned to Canada, a country they had previously considered a secondary option. That neighbor then reaped billions of dollars, opening up a prosperous wheat export future, while American farmers lost all motivation to plant. What happened, and how does it affect your meal today? Let's explore the 6 countries that quietly abandoned America and chose Canada as their new generation. Wheat supplier note. This information is compiled from statistical data not intended to defame any organization. Number 1, the United Kingdom. Wheat used to be one of the sectors the US absolutely dominated since the 1960s. America was not only the world's largest wheat exporter, but also set standards for varieties, logistics, and global transaction prices in that game. One of the US's oldest and most trusted partners was the United Kingdom, a companion on many fronts from politics to trade between them. Wheat contracts didn't need many binding terms. Trust was the default, however. In 2025, that default trust is quietly changing. In just the first half of the year, Canada rose to the number 1 position in wheat exports to the UK, accounting for nearly 32% of total imports, approximately 740,000 tons, according to preliminary statistics from the UK Trade Agency. Meanwhile, US wheat volume dropped more than 41% year over year. There was no public announcement, no official rejection, but the containers departing from Vancouver and arriving punctually at British ports were enough to reflect a reality. The UK is turning away, and Canada is being chosen. The question is why. To understand this, we need to look back at a relationship once so close it needed no confirmation for decades. The US was the UK's most stable wheat supplier, not just in volume, but in familiarity. Mills in Manchester, Leeds and Birmingham used to automatically order from the US as if no other option existed. They needed wheat with suitable moisture and stable protein levels, and the US, with its vast Midwest, always delivered that reliability. Ironically, became a weakness when the game changed after Brexit. The UK was no longer part of the EU's unified system. They needed new trade partners, not just trustworthy, but clear, transparent, and capable of ensuring supply during uncertain times. And Canada, with the Canada-UK Trade Continuity Agreement, perfectly met the UK's needs. Near total tariff exemption for agricultural products, punctual deliveries, and a transparent traceability system from farm to mill. Meanwhile, the US, despite its large production, faced a series of problems early in the year. Shortage of seasonal labor due to immigration crackdowns, congestion at major ports like Houston, disrupted logistics systems, and many orders unable to be delivered on time. According to the US Department of Agriculture, over 300,000 tons of wheat intended for export to the UK in Q2 couldn't be executed as planned. British importers had no choice but to turn to a more reliable partner at mills in the UK. What matters isn't political relationships, but whether the raw materials arrive on time every Tuesday, because one delayed shipment can slow down thousands of loaves on the production line and disrupt domestic supply chains in the food industry. Punctuality is worth more than a price discount. So Canada, with a shipping system from Saskatchewan to Vancouver taking less than 48 hours, became the natural choice. And the situation in the US turned bleak. Revenue from the UK market, which once reached nearly $500 million per year, has now dropped by almost half, according to the US Grains Export Council. Over 1,200 workers in Kansas, Montana, and North Dakota regions, specializing in UK exports, are now facing layoffs, furloughs, or switching to other crops. The saddest part is that the UK wasn't just a normal customer, it was a country that prioritized US imports not because of policy obligations, but because of symbolic trust. but precisely because the relationship was too familiar with too little paperwork and too many assumptions. Once trust began to waver, everything unraveled quickly, and Canada they won with punctuality, standardization, and consistency, while the US struggled with labor and infrastructure issues. Canada quietly loaded its wheat onto ships across the Atlantic and secured space in European mills, flour silos, and that was enough to rewrite the global wheat trade map. And the story doesn't end there. Next, we'll look at a country that used to consume millions of tons of US wheat each year and has just signed a long-term import deal with Alberta number 2, Spain. In June, American farmers in Kansas and North Dakota were preparing for harvest as usual. But unlike past seasons, there were no confirmation messages from Spanish partners. No shipping schedules, no new orders. The wheat ripened, but the buyers had changed course. Spain used to be one of the most stable and agreeable customers of US wheat processing plants. In Castilla, Lancia, Valencia, and Zaragoza consumed hundreds of thousands of tons. Annually, mainly for industrial bread and animal feed, they bought regularly in large volumes and almost never haggled in export circles. Spain was known as the easy trust. As long as quality and consistency were there, contracts would follow. So what made them leave silently without notice? It didn't start in the fields, but in a European security meeting, their NATO member states were urged to sharply increase defense spending. Spain, with a domestic policy and post-pandemic budget still in recovery, maintained a 2.1% GDP level. Below expectations, the disagreement didn't lead to a breakdown, but left a sense of unease that trade and agriculture might still be indirectly affected for Spanish importing companies. That feeling was enough to trigger red flags. No one said outright that defense tensions would lead to trade sanctions. But everyone understood that in a world where policies can change after a single speech, nothing is guaranteed, so they began searching for a partner not only with good quality, but also clarity and respect in trade relations. Canada didn't need much lobbying for years. It has maintained a transparent supply chain from the plains of Saskatchewan to ports like Halifax and St. John, with real-time traceable data, politically neutral contracts, and most importantly, no rule changes halfway through for Spanish importers. This created a peace of mind that didn't need to be interpreted from Q2 2025. Canadian wheat exports to Spain surged, making up over 22% of demand in northern Iberia. A share previously held mainly by the US, notably contracts weren't signed because of low prices, but thanks to detailed information on planting areas, cultivation methods, climate standards and post-H harvest storage for an economy increasingly focused on ESG, environmental social governance. This was a proactive offer not every supplier could match. By the end of Q2, Canada had recorded over $164 million in wheat exports to Spain, 3 times higher than the same period last year. This was part of Canada's total European grain export revenue, which is now approaching $1 billion for 2025 alone. 7 months ahead of schedule. This growth has not only boosted domestic agriculture, but also driven expansion in transport, storage, and inspection capabilities, especially in provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta. This shift needed no press conference, no political declarations. It unfolded quietly within the food industry through redirected email orders, rerouted ships, and newly rewritten contracts for the first time without the US flag in the upper right corner in American farms. This hasn't made a stir, but it has left a clear void in export figures, according to US Department of Agriculture estimates Spain alone contributed over $480 million annually to the U.S. wheat industry between 2018 to 2023 in the first half of this year. That figure has fallen to under $220 million, the lowest in 12 years. Wheat-dependent states like Kansas, North Dakota, and Montana are among the hardest hit. In some North Dakota counties, stockpile rates have exceeded 38% of total production, forcing many farms to sell off quickly to avoid spoilage for Spain. a country repeatedly affected by regional crises and markets. Politicization choosing Canada was not a reaction, it was a strategy, not because the US was worse, but because Canada offered them more control. Contracts were signed based on technical standards without policy conditions. Traceability documents were available even before negotiations in the US. The harvest goes on, but farmers are discouraged because the buyers are no longer there. Number 3, Japan, in a world where stability is increasingly rare and trade is increasingly politicized. Some countries still choose their own path, negotiating, not with statements, not reacting with pressure, but with standards. Japan is one of them. Few people know that in a laboratory in Osaka, technicians strictly test wheat flour samples with an extensorif, a device that measures gluten elasticity. If the protein content drops by 0.1% or if the elasticity index slightly deviates from the standard, the order is halted. And that is how they are changing their wheat suppliers. No press conferences, no bold headlines, just new contracts, consistent figures, and a small line that clearly states Canada's CDWR. Number 1, in the first 6 months of 2025, Canada has become Japan's number 1 wheat supplier, surpassing both the US and Australia, 2 countries that had dominated this market for decades. Preliminary data from Japan's Ministry of Agriculture shows wheat imports from the US fell nearly 28%, while imports from Canada rose over 34%. The reason is that Canada meets what Japan never compromises on: quality down to the milligram and consistency. Beyond doubt, the supply chain from Canada to Japan is far from simple, but every link is designed to leave no room for risk. Each shipment is inspected twice, once at the source warehouse, once at the export port. Indices such as protein test weight and moisture are clearly listed and allow Japanese partners to verify them at any time. After the shipment arrives in Canada, it is a technical procedure. In Japan, it is respect in a market where even a small deviation forces companies to publicly apologize to customers. Canada's proactive provision of inspection certificates from Health Canada is a highly appreciated detail. It not only helps reduce legal risks for Japanese food brands, but also clearly conveys a message: we understand what you need and we're ready to prove it with data, not words. This is something the US does not always manage to do in states like Oregon, Washington, and North Dakota. Merto, which specialize in wheat for Japan, inventories are rising rapidly, while new orders are down. Nearly 40% US wheat export revenue to Japan over the past 12 months has fallen from over USD 670 million to about 430 million, the lowest level since 2011 for American farmers. This is not just about losing a market. It is the feeling of being overtaken in what used to be their home turf. In contrast, Canada is expanding its investment in this very market. In 2025, Ottawa increased the budget for the protein testing and gluten analysis system by another 22%. The transport route from Saskatchewan to the Port of Vancouver is also being upgraded with a budget of over KD 38 million, not to receive more orders, but to ensure every shipment meets standards. In many conversations with Japanese importers, what is mentioned is not good price or trade incentives. What makes them choose Canada is the peace of mind that every shipment has a clear origin, every discrepancy is traceable, and if there's a problem, there is no need for argument. Just present the inspection report from across the Pacific. American farmers cannot help but see the shift, and perhaps what bothers them most is not losing the market where Samuel will under Mimo, but losing faith in what was once considered their strength. America can grow vast fields of golden wheat, but to maintain markets like Japan, where every milligram is a matter of honor, they need more than that. They need to return to what once made American agriculture: great precision and unwavering commitment. Regardless of the season for Canada, being chosen does not mean victory. It is a reminder: if one shipment fails, the entire supply chain could be reconsidered, And the Japanese will not criticize Citi. They will simply switch to another partner quietly, just as they did this time. When a perfectionist nation like Japan starts to change, the rest of the world will have to reconsider its own standards, because if even the most loyal markets demand transparency and meticulousness, down to the smallest figures who can still afford to rely on close enough number for Germany, in a country where bread is considered a cultural heritage, people do not eat just because they are hungry. A loaf of bread in Germany is a symbol of craftsmanship, of pride, and of trust in each ingredient inside. Germans always ask a question that seems simple, this: flour, where does it come from, and is it truly clean? And that question is reshaping the wheat trade map in Europe. Since early 2025, Germany has officially expanded its law on responsible supply chains. Businesses from supermarket chains to food factories must prove that the entire process of creating a product is transparent and environmentally friendly. Every bag of flour, every container, every grain must have an ethical dossier, not for advertising but for legal compliance. Under the new law, certification alone is no longer enough. Businesses need data: CO2 emissions, water usage, pesticide residues, soil standards. All must be measurable, storable, and traceable. And in this regard, Canada has been almost fully prepared. Every farm in Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Manitoba applies digital agriculture technology sensors, measure greenhouse gases, record irrigation levels, monitor cultivation processes. Rayos Tins Church in Maraths, all connected to a centralized data management system. When a shipment leaves the port of Vancouver, it carries not only wheat, but an entire journey that has been verified in Germany that is highly valuable. No promises needed, no brochures. Just scan the QR code on a flour bag and everything appears clearly with independent agency verification, and if needed, verifiable at any time. Not everyone can keep up with that. American wheat is still good, yields are still high, but emission tracking systems, batch-level carbon reporting or seasonal data recording and RIP, are still optional, not mandatory standards. Farms in North Dakota or Kansas may produce high-quality wheat, but if they cannot prove the production process is clean, they simply are no longer chosen. Not because Germans turned their backs, but because they are not allowed to take the risk, and so orders gradually slip away. According to the USDA, in just the first half of 2025, the US lost nearly 1.2 million tons of wheat market share in the EU to Canada, most of which came from the German market. Meanwhile, Canada increased its wheat exports to the EU by over 30%, with Germany accounting for nearly 1/5 of that growth, one supermarket at a time. One bakery chain after another, they gradually shifted orders to a supply source that can justify itself before the law. Germans do not need to know where you grow your wheat. What they need is your ability to explain how you grow it. Whether the field is in Saskatchewan or North Dakota matters less than this: how much CO2 was emitted, how was fertilizer used, is there evidence? And Canada has done this very well, thanks to thorough early preparation, environmental inspection systems, by batch real-time supply chain traceability, and transparent policies from the seeding stage. No need to say I'm clean, let the data prove it. Meanwhile, many American farmers, though still doing well, lack the tools to record their processes. They lose orders, not because of declining quality, but because they cannot provide documentation to meet new standards. And the unfortunate thing is, they are not wrong, just not adapted in time as the market shifts toward responsibility and transparency. Those who prepared early will move faster. Perhaps now is the time for global agriculture, not just the US or Canada, to re-examine its direction, not just aiming to grow and sell more, but more importantly, how to ensure every harvest comes with a sustainable, clear, provable data ecosystem, and one that can stand up to scrutiny. And what do you think about this? Quiet but profound change. If you were an importer, would you choose quality or transparency? And would that choice bring the success Canada has achieved? Number 5, Indonesia, from the UK to Spain, then Japan and Germany. Each country that turned its cent of cost can affect the entire inflation index. Price stability is not just a priority, it's a prerequisite. The US used to play the role of a stable supplier, even if its volume wasn't as large as Australia or Russia. But starting from late 2024, Indonesia began shifting heavily toward Canada, not because Canadian wheat was cheaper, but because Canada could quote prices in advance, commit to them, and support contract structuring aligned with the buyer's budget cycle, according to data from Q2 2025. Canada supplied 2.44